Water hammers against a tangled raft of logs, thousands wedged in the current, the roar so loud it drowns out any plea for help. On this river, men don't walk, they run for their lives atop slick, spinning timber, knowing a single misstep means being crushed or swallowed whole by the black water. This was no adventure. It was America's deadliest job, a brutal gamble for 9,000 workers each spring, stakes measured in broken bodies and vanished names. Why did so many risk everything here? And how did so many die unseen beneath the timber? The answer begins with the rivers themselves, transformed from pathways of commerce into corridors of death. Rivers became the arteries of America's timber empire, not just by chance, but because they offered a deal no railroad or ox trail could match. Moving 1,000 board feet of pine by water cost as little as 4 cents, barely a fraction of the 35 cents demanded by rail companies, and almost nothing compared to the endless labor of horse teams dragging logs through mud and snow. Timber bosses read the numbers in ledgers and chose the river every time, even as the tally of lost men grew alongside the profits. The St. Croix River alone carried 450 million board feet in a single peak year. That's enough timber to build a city, entire forests uprooted and set adrift. Across the upper Mississippi and its tributaries, the count surged even higher, with more than 1 billion board feet thundering downstream in the spring freshet. Each log, stripped of its roots and bark, became one more body in a surging mass that cared nothing for the men sent to keep it moving. The logic was simple. The more wood that reached the sawmills, the more money returned to the company's books. Delays meant disaster. Jammed logs cost thousands of dollars a day, and a single stalled drive could bankrupt a mill town overnight. So the river was forced to work at maximum capacity, packed with wood from bank to bank, the current weaponized for profit. In this system, human lives became just another line item, measured against the staggering volume of timber that had to reach market, no matter the cost. Winter on the riverbanks meant silence, but not rest. As soon as the first snow hardened the ground, crews began felling pine and birch, hauling each trunk to the frozen edges of the river. There, men stacked logs in orderly rows, sometimes 10 feet high, stretching for miles along the banks and across the thick ice. Timber companies called this banking, a system born of necessity and risk. The cold preserved the wood, preventing rot, while the solid ice made a perfect platform for piling more than the river could ever carry at once. All winter, the stacks grew, silent and heavy, waiting for the thaw. The real work and the real danger waited for spring. As the snowpack melted in April and May, rivers swelled with icy, unpredictable power. Dams built upstream released their stored water in sudden surges, known as freshets, timed to match the breakup of the ice. The entire winter's harvest, sometimes 1 million logs or more, was unleashed in a single roaring flood. The river became a conveyor belt of death, jammed bank to bank with timber, every log fighting to reach the mills downstream. This was the moment the companies hired their jocks, seasonal rivermen, many of them young, desperate, or new to the country. Their job was to ride the chaos, balancing on spinning logs, pike pole in hand, as the current threatened to swallow them whole. For a few short weeks, the river was transformed from a silent winter storehouse into a lethal machine, and the men who worked it knew that spring was not just a season, but a reckoning. 9,000 men stepped onto the river each spring, their names inked in company ledgers and lost to the current. In the payroll books of the St. Croix Boom Company, the Chippewa Lumber and Boom, and dozens of smaller outfits, the numbers stack up, 9,000 pay envelopes, 9,000 risks taken, 9,000 men gambling their lives for a season's wage. Some were farmhands lured by a labor agent's promise. Others fresh off the boat from Finland or Ireland, drawn by rumors of quick money and the chance to prove themselves in America's hardest trade. Most would never be known beyond a single line in a ledger or a telegram sent home. The river did not care. It demanded bodies, thousands of them, spread from the headwaters of the Penobscot to the muddy bends of the upper Mississippi. On any given morning, a man might find himself one of hundreds straddling the logs, boots spiked for grip, pike pole ready, the water below black and bottomless. The roar of the current drowned out thought. The only thing that mattered was keeping your balance, because one slip meant disappearing between the logs, sometimes in full view of a dozen men, sometimes without a sound. For every face in the crowd, there was a family waiting somewhere downstream, watching the river for a sign. Wives and children counted the days, hoping for a letter or a safe return, but the odds were always against them. 9,000 men entered the spring drive. Not all would see the summer. The scale of the workforce was measured not just in numbers, but in the weight of those who never came home. On the river, death waited in two forms: crushing and drowning. Nearly half of all fatalities, 45%, came when the logs shifted without warning. A man could be standing tall one moment, pike pole braced, then vanish the next as 1,000 pounds of pine rolled underfoot. The logs, slick with river water and packed so tight they creaked under their own weight, moved as if alive. When a jam broke or a single log spun, the force was unstoppable. Limbs snapped, chests were flattened, bodies pinned beneath the pile, sometimes never recovered, just another absence in the tally books. Drowning claimed 38%. The water was always cold, the current always hungry. A missed step sent a man between the logs, boots catching for a split second before the river pulled him under. The gaps closed above, sealing him in darkness. Even expert swimmers stood little chance. The weight of soaked wool and leather dragged them down, and the nearest handhold was often just another spinning log. Some surfaced miles downstream, battered and blue. Others disappeared for good, names crossed off quietly by the foreman. Survivors spoke of the helplessness, the knowledge that once you slipped, there was almost nothing anyone could do. One breaker, years later, recalled, "You could hear a man shout, but by the time you turned, he was gone. The river took him, same as it always did." The numbers told the story, but the river made sure the lesson was learned in blood. A log jam wasn't just a traffic jam of timber, it was a loaded gun. When hundreds of thousands of logs locked together at a bend or a shallow, the river's force built behind them, silent and invisible, until the pressure reached a breaking point. The men who faced these piles knew that at any moment, the entire mass could explode. One misjudged move, a single slip of the pike pole, and the jam would let go, sending a wall of logs and water roaring downstream with the power of a landslide. On Maine's Kennebec River, nearly a third of all log driving deaths came from these sudden explosions. That's a figure unmatched, even by the worst mining disasters of the era. The odds for a dynamiter or jam breaker were worse than for a man working deep underground. The river hid its violence until the last second. The logs might creak and shift, giving a few seconds warning, a sound like bones snapping underfoot. Then, without mercy, the jam would burst. Timber weighing thousands of pounds shot forward, crushing anything in its path. Men vanished, swept beneath the torrent, their bodies pinned and broken, or simply never found. The only tools against this were nerve, a length of fuse, and a stick of dynamite. Breakers crawled out onto the shifting pile, drilled holes into the heart of the jam, and set their charges, hoping to outrun the blast. Sometimes they did. Sometimes the explosion came too soon, or the jam collapsed before they made it back to shore. The river, for a moment, became an avalanche of splinters and spray. For the men who survived, the memory of fire and shattered wood stayed with them long after the current washed the blood away. The log jam's explosive power was a constant reminder. The river was never tamed, only provoked. Numbers alone struggle to capture the cost, but the ledgers do not lie. For every 1,000 men who took to the river, 15 did not return. That is a death rate of 1.5% per season, a figure that towers over nearly every other job in American history. Coal miners in the same era faced a risk less than half as great. Railroad workers who laid track through dynamited mountains and across collapsing bridges saw about 8 deaths per 1,000. Even the men who felled timber in the deep woods, miles from help, were less likely to die than those who tried to ride it downstream. Stack the numbers side by side. Log driving, 15 deaths per 1,000. Coal mining, 7. Railroads, 4. Factory work, less than 1. The river demanded a sacrifice unmatched by any mill, mine, or machine shop. In some years, the St. Croix or Penobscot would claim more men than a mining disaster or a train wreck. The difference was that here, the losses came in steady drips. One man crushed, another drowned, another vanished without a trace, until the season's tally made clear that this was not just dangerous work. It was a profession built on risk, where the odds were written in blood. These were not anonymous statistics to the families left behind. Each number meant a telegram, a body found days later, or a name quietly erased from the payroll. The river's appetite was constant, and no amount of skill or strength could guarantee a safe return. Behind every statistic, there was a face, a family, a story cut short by the current. A logjam begins as a simple slowdown, a single log catching on a rock or river bend. But behind that first snag, the current drives wave after wave of timber into the pile, each new log locking against its neighbors. The force that holds it all together is friction. Wet pine against wet pine, gripping with a coefficient of about 0.3. It's enough to turn a river of moving wood into a solid, shifting mass, where 1 million pounds of timber can hang suspended above the water on nothing but the tangled pressure of its own weight. Inside the jam, the physics turn deadly. Water trapped beneath the pile creates a dead water zone, where the current slows almost to nothing, but the pressure keeps building. At the heart of a large jam, that pressure can reach 7 pounds per square inch, enough to lift logs the size of telephone poles and wedge them into arches that span the channel. These buoyant arches form a false ceiling, holding back the flood while the river's full force presses from behind. Every log in the pile is under tension, each one a potential trigger. The structure looks stable, but it's nothing more than a temporary truce between friction, buoyancy, and the relentless push of the river. With velocity dropping and more logs racking up behind, the jam becomes a loaded spring. The longer it holds, the more inevitable its failure. For the men sent to break it, the danger isn't just the visible wall of timber. It's the invisible forces waiting to be unleashed with a single catastrophic slip. Breakers came from Finland, Ireland, Sweden, and the battered farms of the Midwest. Men drawn by the promise of $4 or $5 a day, sometimes more if they took on the jams. Over half the crews on the St. Croix and Chippewa were immigrants, men who arrived with strong backs and little English, hoping the river would offer more than the mines or the fields. The pay could send money home or keep a family afloat for a season, but every dollar came with risk. Breakers or jocks were mostly young, but the river aged them quickly. Wages were high because the work was dangerous, $4 to $5 a day, plus bonuses for every jam cleared, sometimes $10 for a single key log, a fortune earned in minutes or lost in an instant. Big Bob McCready stood out among them. 6'4", 200 pounds, he moved across the logs as if born to it, pike pole flashing, boots spiked for grip. When a jam stopped the drive, it was Big Bob who went first, crawling out with nothing but his pole and a length of fuse. His friend Jock Nimi, a Finn with hands like sledgehammers, worked beside him. They trusted their boots, their poles, and each other, but never the river. Every spring, new names appeared on the roster and old ones disappeared, claimed by the current. The river offered no mercy, but the men who faced it did not step out unarmed. Every morning, Jock Nimi's hands closed around the same battered tools. A peavey with a steel head, a 6-foot shaft, and a curved hook sharpened by 1,000 near misses. Patented in 1897 as number 578,939, the peavey was designed to grip and roll logs. But in the chaos of a jam, even the best steel could snap like a twig. Alongside it, the pike pole, a 6-foot ash pole tipped with iron, served as both balance and lifeline, a way to push or pull a spinning log just far enough to avoid being crushed. The boots, heavy leather with iron caulks hammered into the soles, bit into the slick timber, but a single misstep on wet bark could send a man sliding into the current. Harnesses, too, were introduced. Patent number 704,921, a hemp rope cinched at the waist, meant to anchor a breaker to the shore or a waiting boat. But the river had little respect for patents. Rope frayed, boots split, peavey handles shattered under the pressure of a log pile weighing thousands of pounds. In the end, every piece of gear was a wager. Steel against water, leather against ice, human ingenuity against the blind, crushing force of the river. The tools might buy a second of survival, a moment's grip on the edge, but nothing could guarantee a safe return. As Jock balanced on the rolling timber, boots digging in, pike pole braced, he knew the next slip would be his last, no matter what he carried in his hands. The river's voice was never silent. It thundered day and night, a constant grinding roar that swallowed every other sound. Water crashed against the banks, slapping the piled logs, echoing off the bluffs in a low, relentless growl. Even before a man set foot on the timber, he felt the vibration in his bones. To step onto the drive was to enter a world ruled by noise. The slap of the current, the hollow boom as two logs collided, the sharp, sickening crack when timber split under pressure. When a jam threatened, the river's pitch changed. Logs creaked and groaned, their friction building to a chorus of warning. Sometimes the pile would shift with a sudden, splintering snap, a sound like a tree being felled in reverse, but amplified by the water's force. Men learned to listen for danger in the smallest details. The scrape of iron spikes on wet bark, the hiss of water forced through gaps in the pile, the muffled shout of a driver losing his footing. Boots with caulks grated against the slick wood, steel points biting for purchase as the logs spun beneath. Pike poles clattered against timber, iron tips striking with a metallic ring. Every sound carried meaning, each one a signal, a threat, a reminder that the river did not forgive mistakes. For those who survived, the memory of that sound, the roar, the crack, the scrape never faded. It was the river's warning, echoing long after the drive was done. Angle Rock sat like a loaded trap, holding back a mass of timber that defied belief. 12,300 logs wedged tight against the bend, their weight pressing into the current, their ends splintering where friction locked them in place. The river, swollen by spring melt, moved at 4.2 feet per second, a relentless force shoving more wood into the jam with every heartbeat. Each log added another layer of tension, the whole pile straining against the invisible grip that kept disaster at bay. Big Bob McCready moved along the edge, boots biting into slick bark, pike pole braced in both hands. He could feel the pressure humming underfoot, each vibration a warning from the river's hidden muscles. He paused, reading the jam the way a gambler reads a deck, looking for weakness, for the telltale shift that meant the pile was ready to blow. Jock Nemi, never far behind, watched for signals, a split in the grain, a log trembling against the current, the faintest creak rising above the roar. Every man on the crew understood what was coming. The river had been forced to hold too much for too long. The logs at the heart of the jam were packed so tight that even the water seemed to hesitate, swirling in dark eddies beneath the surface. Behind the pile, the current built up, pressing harder each hour, searching for the smallest gap. Big Bob checked his fuse and dynamite, sweat freezing on his neck despite the spring sun. He called out orders, voice barely audible over the water's growl. The men tensed, waiting for the moment when all the pressure, all the weight, would let go. They knew that when it happened, there would be no time to run, only a split second to leap, to pray, or to disappear under the crushing flood. The jam at Angle Rock held for hours, then let go in seconds. The first sign was a deep, splitting crack, a sound that cut through the river's roar and turned every head. 12,000 logs, pressed together by 1,000,000 pounds of force, surged forward as if the river itself had snapped its leash. Men scrambled for footing, boots slipping on wet bark, pike poles tossed aside as the pile began to move. There was no warning, no time to shout. The logs rolled and bucked, crushing bodies beneath their weight, dragging others into the black water. The current, freed from its prison, swept everything downstream: timber, tools, men. Jock Nemi vanished in the chaos, last seen clinging to a spinning log as the pile erupted beneath him. Thomas O'Hara, a breaker from County Mayo, was caught by a tumbling trunk and pinned before he could even try to run. The official tally from that day lists 20 dead, 12 crushed, 4 drowned, 2 lost in the blast, and 2 more never found. Survivors pulled bodies from the eddies for hours, some broken beyond recognition, others blue and silent, their hands still curled around useless poles. A witness recalled, "It was as if the river had been waiting for us. One minute we were standing, the next there was nothing but water and wood." The river gave no time for mourning. The logs kept coming, the current indifferent to the men it had just claimed. Payroll ledgers were updated with new names crossed out. Telegrams sent to families who would wait by the window for news that would never bring their loved ones home. The death toll was not a number to the men on the drive. It was the price paid, again and again, for every city built from river timber. In 1915, the upper Mississippi rose 12 feet above flood stage, swallowing banks and bridges in a torrent of black water. Near Winona, a jam broke loose with a force no man could resist. 18 river drivers, caught on the pile as it surged forward, were swept over the high wagon bridge. 11 were never found. The official record lists names, but the river kept the bodies. Even now, the current beneath that bridge runs cold, as if holding their memory just below the surface. The aftermath was silent. Families gathered along the banks, scanning the driftwood for any sign. A boot tangled in roots, a battered cap washed ashore. The company paid for a reinforced steel boom and hired a state inspector, but the river's appetite did not change. The men who returned to work the next spring did so with the knowledge that the river could take them just as easily. The memory of that disaster settled into the culture of the drivers. It found its way into the songs sung at river camps and in the verses passed down among crews. An old lyric, first recorded in 1893, carried the weight of these losses. 18 men on the river's run, swept away before the sun. 11 gone, no grave nor stone, carried down where the black logs moan. For the men who balanced on spinning timber, the river was not just a workplace. It was a graveyard with no markers, a current that sang its own mournful tune. Each spring drive became a kind of ritual, a test of courage and memory, with every man knowing that his own name might be the next one lost to the water. The songs, the silence, and the waiting families all became part of the river's story, echoing long after the last log had passed downstream. By the early 20th century, the river's grip on the timber trade began to loosen. Gasoline trucks and steam-powered haulers pushed their way into the forests, rumbling down roads that once belonged to oxen and sleds. The numbers on company ledgers shifted almost overnight. Where floating 1,000 board feet downstream had once cost 4 cents, hauling that same load by truck soon dropped the price by 60%. Timber bosses, always watching the bottom line, saw a new kind of arithmetic. Roads could be built anywhere the trees still stood, and trucks didn't drown their drivers or swallow them between rolling logs. For the first time, the river's dangers became optional. No longer did a man have to balance on a spinning log, pike pole in hand, with the current threatening to swallow him whole. Instead, he could ride beside a load of pine on solid ground, the engine's growl replacing the river's roar. The economics left little room for nostalgia. Each mile of new road means fewer bodies lost to the current, fewer telegrams sent to grieving families downstream. Timber towns watched as the old camps emptied, the songs and rituals of rivermen fading with each season. The river drives, once the lifeblood of the industry, found themselves outpaced by machines that cared nothing for freshets or ice or the physics of a jam. The cost savings were too great, the risks too high to ignore. In the ledgers and in the woods, the age of the river driver was coming to a close, replaced by wheels, engines, and a new kind of danger on the open road. In the summer of 1976, the Kennebec River in Maine carried its final burden of timber. Word spread quickly. This would be the last commercial log drive in the United States. Onlookers lined the banks, some with cameras, others silent, watching as 30,000 cords of pulp wood began their journey downstream. The river, once a roaring artery of industry, now moved under a sky heavy with memory. The logs floated past as they always had, twisting and bumping together, each one a fragment of a vanishing world. The men who worked that final drive knew they were closing a chapter, written in blood and water. For more than a century, the Kennebec had swallowed men whole, its current as lethal. In 1976, as it was in 1876. The tools had changed little. Peavies and pike poles still flashed above the current. Boots still gripped the slick bark, and every misstep still threatened to end in silence beneath the logs. But the crowd on the shore understood this was not just another spring run. It was a funeral procession for a way of life that demanded everything from those who dared to ride the river. As the last logs slipped past Augusta and Waterville, the river's voice seemed quieter, almost respectful. The machines and trucks had taken over, but the memory of the drives lingered in the cold spray and the shifting piles of timber. 30,000 cords, enough to fill a city block to the rooftops, floated away, carrying with them the ghosts of every man who had ever stood, pike pole in hand, on a spinning log, one step from disappearing forever. The Kennebec's final drive was not just an end, but a reckoning with all that had been lost to the current. On a quiet rise above the St. Croix River, a stone monument stands, its face chiseled with 12 names. Dedicated in 1998, the Upper St. Croix Lumbermen Memorial tries to give form to a history that mostly slipped beneath the surface. The men listed there are among the few whose stories survived the current, victims of log drives, their deaths recorded, their families remembered by name. But the stone is small, and the list is shorter than the river's memory. For every name carved in granite, dozens more are missing. The archives hold only fragments: a payroll ledger with a line crossed out, a coroner's note about a body found days downstream, a company telegram sent to a widow who would never see her husband again. 12 names, when the true toll ran to more than 1,000. The official count, 1,200 dead between 1860 and 1910, cannot capture the men lost without record, the bodies never recovered, the faces known only to those who waded and waded along the riverbank. Most river drivers vanished into the statistics, their lives reduced to a number, their deaths marked by silence. The river swallowed not just the men, but their stories, their families' hopes, their place in the world. The monument stands in quiet testimony, but the anonymity remains. The cost of American lumber was measured not in dollars or board feet, but in the absence left behind, a debt that no stone can repay. The rivers are quiet now, their violence forgotten beneath smooth reflections. Yet the timber that built American cities carries the weight of men lost in the current, unmarked, uncounted, their families left with only silence. Today, no workplace claims so many lives, but the calculus of profit over flesh endures. Every structure standing owes its existence to men who vanished beneath the logs. Their absence lingers, a debt still unpaid. What do you think their sacrifice means for us now?